The paper that banned the word for nearly 2 years just published this. I'm a genocide scholar. I know it when I see it. Finally, even the New York Times, which has been an incredible defender of Israel, like an insane defender of Israel, has finally come out and is allowing people on their op-ed side to basically write the truth. Something that we've all seen. Something that we all recognize. It also doesn't end there. I mean, it's like Israel has still consistently bombed Lebanon and conducted acts of terror in Lebanon, on Lebanese soil throughout this entire process with very little, very limited media coverage. Israel is also using the Druze in Syria against the current American-backed HTS Syrian government, okay? And I'm not even a fan of those guys, right? I mean, that's literally Al-Qaeda. And Israel is now using, while they were associated with the ISIS-style al-Nusra formations in Syria because it was against Assad, now they're using the Druze minority groups in the area by arming them and actually causing instability in Syria as well, while simultaneously bombing Lebanon. What are we doing? They are a danger to every nation in the region. They're a danger to every single person in the area. But is my feelings not important to you, Hasan? What the hell? Shut up, dude. Don't even joke about this shit. But yes, the answer is simple. Your feelings do not matter. I know that person is joking. The same arguments you use to defend genocide of fascists in the Israeli government can be used to defend Hamas. I gave dishonest Alan Dershowitz a lesson on history and morality, double standards on Israel and Palestine.
Apparently, according to Alan Dershowitz, everything is the fault of the Palestinians. So many falsehoods in there. There was no Palestinian state offered in 1967. That's when Israel began its illegal occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. And even if we buy this nonsense that Clinton and Barack...
They aren't arming the Druze. They're firing airstrikes on behalf of them. And one of the many Druze spiritual leaders is trying to align himself with Israel. Yeah, they're going to use the Druze to do more land grabs in Syria. I mean, they already have occupied chunks of Syria beyond the Golan Heights that they permanently annexed.
1948.
I didn't interrupt you when you were speaking. Can I say my point? You've said all your falsehoods. Now I'm going to debunk them. You said that Clinton and Barack offered a state. Not true. At Camp David, both sides turned down the deal. Shlomo Ben-Ami, who was the foreign minister, said, I wouldn't have taken that deal at Camp David, the Israeli foreign minister. Then Taba came along, and Taba fell apart because Barack went to the polls and lost the elections. Ehud Barak lost the elections. He was a lame duck prime minister. Sharon came in. So you can rewrite history all you want. No one believes that's the case. But even if you were telling the truth, which you're not, let's talk about today. Benjamin Netanyahu brags that he's blocked a two-state solution. The guy who you volunteered to be a lawyer for in front of the International Criminal Court, wanted war crime suspect, has openly bragged that I blocked a two-state solution. His words, I blocked a two-state solution. So you can rewrite history all you want. The present day is proof that you're talking nonsense. This Israeli government, this far-right government, has no interest in peace with the Palestinians, only interested in ethnic cleansing. And the best part of listening to you speak about agency, everything you said could be said about Hamas and the Palestinians. The Palestinians would say Hamas is a result of Israelis not giving us our freedom. Hamas is a result of Israelis besieging and boycotting Gaza for decades on end. Hamas is a result of Israeli leadership coming and killing our...
This is the one aspect that liberals have not gotten on board with, that they can't contend with. Many liberals will say, oh yeah, Israel's doing a genocide without a doubt, but I can't get myself to be aligned with like scary Muslim terrorist groups, okay? I can't put myself in the shoes of like the average Palestinian that has been orphaned by the Israeli state and has been destroyed, has had all of their living standards destroyed. And like how this kind of violence, this kind of permanent violence begets some kind of militant response, understandably. That's it. That's the one aspect that you can't like get many liberals to understand. And that is precisely the reason why so many liberals will actively say I'm a radical, dangerous, terrorism supporter, blah, 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 blah. They just can't. They can't. That's, I mean, more and more of the youth don't give a shit, and they recognize right from wrong. They understand that, of course, there's going to be some kind of militant response to Israel's genocide, Israel's actions in general, in perpetuity. But that is the reason why, like I said, that is the reason why so many people still react in the ways that they do to my commentary on the issue, because I contextualize the violence or the militant resistance that comes as a direct consequence of Israel's unlimited amounts of violence. If I just stayed talking about just Israel and then did not contextualize why people defend themselves against this kind of violence, then I wouldn't be doing my job. I don't think I would be giving, I don't think I'd be giving justice. I don't think I'd be giving a voice to voiceless people that otherwise will never be heard. Their perspective never shared in Western news. That's it. Omer Bartov is a professor of Holocaust and genocide studies at Brown University. Okay? He is the one who wrote the op-ed on the New York Times. I'm a genocide scholar. I know it when I see it. Never again. Now, remember, they are like, this is as close to, this is what you're going to get. Like, that's it. You know what I mean? You got a dude who is a Holocaust scholar, just like many Holocaust scholars and many genocide scholars have spoken out on numerous outlets since October 7. But Omer Bartov is Israeli, okay? Omer Bartov is a Holocaust scholar. He is an Israeli-born Holocaust scholar. His entire life's work is reporting on, writing on, and aggressively pursuing the truth on the Holocaust and genocides, okay? Just as Raz Segal wrote shortly after October 7 about Israel's conduct in the Gaza Strip, saying, again, that almost this exact same article title, Raz Segal wrote for the Jewish Currents, almost this exact same article. And now, almost 2 years after the fact, you finally have the New York Times also writing this exact same article. Obviously, things are changing, okay? If you recall, Melissa Barrera, straight up got fired from her job as an actress on Scream, on the Scream franchise, because she posted a piece of the article that Raz Segal had written. This exact same article in November, okay? And they openly stated that the reason why she was fired was because she had posted anti-Semitic statements. The anti-Semitism was her posting on her Instagram story a quote from Raz Segal, a Jewish Holocaust historian, writing for the Jewish Currents magazine. It's insane. A month after the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th, I believe there was evidence that the Israeli military committed war crimes and potentially crimes against humanity in its counterattack on Gaza. But contrary to the cries of Israel's fiercest critics, the evidence did not seem to me to rise to the crime of genocide. By May 2024, the Israel Defense Forces had ordered about 1 million Palestinians sheltering in Rafah, the southernmost and last remaining relatively undamaged city in the Gaza Strip, to move to the beach area of Mawazi, where there was little to no shelter. The army then proceeded to destroy much of Rafah, a feat mostly accomplished by August. At that point, it appeared no longer possible to deny that the pattern of the IDF operations was consistent with the statements denoting genocidal intent made by Israeli leaders in the days after the Hamas attack. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had promised that the enemy would pay a huge price for the attack and that the IDF would turn parts of Gaza where Hamas was operating into rubble. And he called on the residents of Gaza to leave now because we will operate forcefully everywhere. Mr. Netanyahu had urged his citizens to remember what Amalek did to you, a quote many interpreted as a reference to the demand in a biblical passage calling for Israelites to kill alike men and women, infants and sucklings of their ancient enemy. Government and military officials said they were fighting human animals and later called for total annihilation. Nissim Vaturi, the deputy speaker of the parliament, said on X that Israel's task must be erasing the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth. Israel's actions can be understood only as the implementation of the expressed intent to make the Gaza Strip uninhabitable for its Palestinian population. I believe the goal was, and remains today, to force the population to leave the Strip altogether, or, considering that it has nowhere to go, to debilitate the enclave through bombings and severe deprivation of food, clean water, sanitation, and medical aid to such an extent that it is impossible for Palestinians in Gaza to maintain or reconstitute their existence as a group. My inescapable conclusion has become that Israel is committing a genocide against the Palestinian people. Again, this is an Israeli Jewish Holocaust scholar writing this article. Okay? On the New York Times. It's over. This is like the last bastion of defending Israel. New York Times is institutionally one of the greatest defenders of Israel and its genocide and Zionism in general. Always has been. And it has severely escalated journalistic malpractice at the behest of the Israeli state, at the behest of Israel's genocide. It is not an accident that they refuse to call it a genocide. This is an opinion piece on the New York Times now, finally, openly and actively calling it a genocide. It's basically this and the BBC that have done a severe disservice to the public by casting aside their journalistic duty, casting aside their primary responsibility of covering the truth, reporting on the truth, no matter what kind of ally is engaging in this kind of misconduct or genocide. And now even the New York Times is falling. If there was any sort of justice, the New York Times editors that have redirected the coverage in this way would also be criminally prosecuted, as journalists were criminally prosecuted under Nuremberg. Okay? It's that severe. There are people who have blood on their hands at the New York Times, 100%. There are plenty of great reporters at the New York Times. It's one of the most important institutions of journalism. And it is insane to me that a group of editors were basically able to completely change the trajectory of all the reporting on this issue and spike it over and over again. My inescapable conclusion has become that Israel is committing a genocide against the Palestinian people, says Omar. Having grown up in a Zionist home, lived the first half of my life in Israel, served in the IDF as a soldier and officer, and spent most of my career researching and writing on war crimes and the Holocaust, this was a painful conclusion to reach, and one that I resisted as long as I could. But I have been teaching classes on genocide for a quarter of a century. I can recognize one when I see one. This is not just my conclusion. A growing number of experts in genocide studies and international law have concluded that Israel's actions in Gaza can only be defined as a genocide. Ask yourself this question. If Israel is, as a matter of fact, committing a genocide, okay, because it is, right? What does it mean for the entire world to recognize it as such? Why is it that Israel is so aggressively tried to suppress this truth? Because once everyone understands, and it's in writing, once it is legally recognized as a genocide, once that reality becomes impossible to avoid, then all of a sudden the dynamic changes. Then all of a sudden you have a lot more permission to say, well, of course people are going to resist against this. What do you mean? It's that simple. This is what Israel desperately wanted to avoid all along. A recognition of its actions as genocide implies that everyone recognizes that people resisting against said genocide are actually not the bad guys that they were portrayed to be in the media. It's that simple. Palestinians have a right to self-determination, and they have a right to self-defense. That's it. That's it. Cat's out of the bag. Toothpaste is out of the tube. There is no defense for this any longer. I am in Germany, and after watching a couple of your YouTube vids, I now get ads about food help for Gaza and how great it is, but the ads link to no other website. Opening the information about the ads I get, what those are placed by the Israeli government, looks like watching you makes me a target audience for Israeli propaganda. I mean, it makes sense. Guy who was on the fence till reading a New York Times opinion piece, you'd be surprised Connor eats pants. And the reason why I say that is because I'm now major advocate for a lot of these human rights organizations. I think that in many instances, they serve the purpose of America. They serve the purpose of empire by consistently focusing on whoever America wants to dominate. And they say, oh, these guys are doing war crimes, so we have to intervene. We have to militarily destroy them. Having said that, however, since 2021, every single human rights group, human rights organization down to B'Tselem has openly and actively recognized that Israel is an apartheid state. This gives permission structure to people like myself. This allows people like myself, activists of all different backgrounds, to at least point to something else, a position of authority that liberals care about, to say, this is not anti-Semitic. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't so actively try to suppress this information from coming out. If it didn't matter, Israel wouldn't desperately try to stop this recognition from becoming the norm. It's that simple. Now, look, this is the way that the New York Times reported on Israel's genocide as close as like April 2025. This is from the New York Times style article about me. You know, the progressive mind in a MAGA body or whatever. Always unfiltered, sometimes extreme. Mr. Piker is similarly unfiltered with his viewpoints. Some can be extreme. A vocal critic of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, Mr. Piker has been labeled anti-American by people across the political spectrum for saying the country deserved the September 11th attacks. His recent accusations that Israel is committing a genocide, in air quotes, in Gaza, and his diatribes against the Zionist movement have led many supporters of Israel, including liberals like Representative Richie Torres of New York, to call Mr. Piker anti-Semitic. That's how they were covering it in April 2025. This is the same Holocaust historian, Omer Bartov, back in November 10th, 2023, what I believe is a historian of genocide, which is Israel's military occupation and military operations are creating an untenable humanitarian crisis, but it's not a genocide. I believe that there is no proof that genocide is currently taking place in Gaza. That's what Omer Bartov wrote on the New York Times on November 10th, 2023, when Ross Segal was writing articles about how it was definitely genocidal. This is what Omer Bartov was writing, okay? Now 2 years have passed, and his opinion has changed because it's become undeniable. The atrocities have become undeniable. It's impossible for even people who have been brain broken by Zionist upbringing, who still have a moral compass, to deny these realities, these atrocities. It's undeniable. Omer Bartov, in his new article, says, this is not just my conclusion. A growing number of experts in genocide studies and international law have concluded that Israel's actions in Gaza can only be defined as genocide. So has Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur from the West Bank and Gaza, and Amnesty International. South Africa has brought a genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. The continued denial of this designation by states, international organizations, and legal and scholarly experts will cause unmitigated damage, not just to the people of Gaza and Israel, but also the system of international law established in the wake of the horrors of the Holocaust, designed to prevent such atrocities from ever happening again. It is a threat to the very foundations of the moral order on which we all depend. The crime of genocide was defined in 1948 by the United Nations as the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. In determining what constitutes genocide, therefore, we must both establish intent and show that it is being carried out. In Israel's case, that intent has been publicly expressed by numerous officials and leaders. But intent can also be derived from a pattern of operations on the ground, as this pattern became clear by May 2024, and has since become ever clearer as the IDF has systematically destroyed the Gaza Strip. Most genocide scholars are cautious about applying this term to contemporary events, precisely because of the tendency, since it was coined by the Jewish-Polish lawyer Raphael Lemkin in 1944, to attribute it to any case of massacre or inhumanity. Indeed, some argue that the categorization, by the way, the Lemkin Institute has been calling what Israel is doing a genocide since the beginning. Just make no mistake. The person who literally, the institute that is tasked with the institute responsible for the term genocide, coining the term genocide, and the institute that is tasked with identifying genocides around the world has been calling it a genocide for a while. Okay? Indeed, some argue that the categorization should be entirely discarded because it often serves to express outrage than to identify a particular crime. Yet, as Mr. Lemkin recognized, and as the United Nations later agreed, it is crucial to be able to distinguish the attempt to destroy a particular group of people from other crimes under international law, such as war crimes and crimes against humanity. It is the crime above all crimes. It is one that is so horrific of a crime that the retribution does, even if it was done as a retribution, it would still be completely unacceptable. You understand? Even a genocide does not justify a genocide in retaliation. You could say violence begets violence, but it is the worst crime for this reason. Nothing justifies a genocide, even a genocide being acted out. This is because while other crimes entailed indiscriminate or deliberate killing of civilians as individuals, genocide denotes the killing of people as members of a group, geared at irreparably destroying the group itself so that it would never be able to reconstitute itself as a political, social, or cultural entity. Does that not look exactly like what Israel is doing? The answer is yes, because that's precisely what Israel is doing. And that's precisely what this is. It is a genocide. It's that simple. And as the international community signaled by adopting the convention, it is incumbent upon all signatory states to prevent such an attempt, to do all they can to stop it while it is occurring, and to subsequently punish those who were engaged in this crime of crimes, even if it occurred within the borders of a sovereign state. The designation has major political, legal, and moral ramifications. Nations, politicians, and military personnel suspected of, indicted on a charge, or found guilty of genocide are seen beyond the pale of humanity and may compromise or lose their right to remain members of the international community. They lose their lives, or at least that's how it worked in the past. They were executed after being found guilty of doing a genocide. They were hanged. The designation has major political, legal, and moral ramifications. A finding by the International Court of Justice that a particular state is engaged in genocide, especially if enforced by the UN Security Council, can lead to severe sanctions. Politicians or generals indicted on a charge or found guilty of genocide or other breaches of international humanitarian law by the International Criminal Court can face arrest outside of their country. And a society that condones and is complicit in genocide, whatever the stand of its individual citizens may be, will carry this mark of Cain long after the fires of hatred and violence are put out. Israel has denied all allegations of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. The IDF says it investigates reports of crimes, although it has rarely made its findings public, and when breaches of discipline or protocol are acknowledged, it has generally meted light reprimands to its personnel. Israeli military and political leaders repeatedly describe the IDF as acting lawfully, say they issue warnings to civilian populations to evacuate sites about the attack, and blame Hamas for using civilians as human shields. In fact, the systematic destruction in Gaza, not only housing, but also other infrastructure, government buildings, hospitals, universities, schools, mosques, cultural heritage sites, water treatment plants, agricultural areas, and parks, reflects a policy aimed at making the revival of Palestinian life in the territory highly unlikely. According to a recent investigation by Haaretz, an estimated 174,000 buildings have been destroyed or damaged, accounting for up to 70% of all structures in the Strip. So far, more than 58,000 people have been killed, according to the Gazan health authorities, including more than 17,000 children. This number is a severe underestimation, for the record. It is hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that have been killed. This number is impossible to accurately investigate because Israel has successfully dismantled the entire health structure in the Strip as well. Just remember that. Make up nearly a third of the total fatality count as the children. More than 870 of those children were less than 1 year old. More than 2,000 families have been wiped out, the health authorities said. In addition, 5,600 families now count only one survivor. At least 10,000 people are believed to still be buried under the rubble, under the ruins of their homes. More than 138,000 have been wounded and maimed. Gaza now has the grim distinction of having the highest number of amputee children per capita in the world. An entire generation of children subjected to ongoing military attacks, loss of parents, and long-term malnutrition will suffer severe physical and mental repercussions for the rest of their lives. This is why I say it is literally a Holocaust. It is a live-streamed Holocaust of primarily children. The exact same imagery that we saw in the aftermath of the liberation of the camps, we are seeing unfold in real time. Untold additional thousands of chronically ill persons have had little access to hospital care. The horror of what's been happening in Gaza is still described by most observers as war, but this is a misnomer. For the last year, the IDF has not been fighting an organized military body. The version of Hamas that planned and carried out the attacks on October 7th has been destroyed, though the weakened group continues to fight Israeli forces and retains control over the population in areas not held by the Israeli army. Today, the IDF is primarily engaged in an operation of demolition and ethnic cleansing. That's literally been the case since day one, by the way. That's how Mr. Netanyahu's own former chief of staff, minister of defense, and hardliner Moshe Ya'alon in November described on Israel's Democrat TV and in subsequent articles and interviews the attempt to clear northern Gaza of its population. On January 19th, under pressure from Donald Trump, who was a day away from resuming the presidency, a ceasefire went into effect, facilitating the exchange of hostages in Gaza for Palestinian prisoners in Israel. But after Israel's breaking of the ceasefire on March 18th, the IDF has been executing a well-publicized plan to concentrate the entire Gazan population in a quarter of the territory in 3 zones: Gaza City, the central refugee camps, and the Mawazi coastline in the Strip's southwestern edge. Using large numbers of bulldozers and huge aerial bombs supplied by the United States, the military appears to be trying to demolish every remaining structure and establish control over the other 3 quarters of the territory. This is also being facilitated by a plan that provides intermittently limited aid supplies at a few distribution points guarded by the Israeli military, drawing people to the south. Many Gazans are killed in a desperate attempt to obtain food, and the starvation crisis deepens. This person does not even go into the details of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation's scheme of trapping people by dangling a little bit of food in front of them, only to execute them. Hundreds. Israel has killed more civilians just at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation aid zones than Hamas and the Palestinian resistance did on October 7 since its inception. The barbarism is impossible to contend with. Okay? It is insane. Using food after starving an entire population of people, mostly children, using food as a military purpose, as a trap to assassinate people that you know are desperate for the food is insane. This is why I do not shy away and have not shied away from saying the truth, that Israel is a Nazi country and what they are doing is a Nazi thing. Their exterminationist policies resemble the Holocaust. What a deep shame. On July 7th, Defense Minister Israel Katz said the IDF would build a humanitarian city over the ruins of Rafah to initially accommodate 600,000 Palestinians from the Mawazi area who would be provisioned by international bodies and not allowed to leave. They want to build a concentration camp in Rafah too, for the record. Once they have destroyed Rafah, as they have, they now want to build a concentration camp in Rafah and make these people completely stateless, packaged into an even smaller concentration camp than Gaza was, the Gaza Strip was. Some might describe this campaign as ethnic cleansing, not a genocide, but there's a link between the crimes. When an ethnic group has nowhere to go and is constantly displaced from one so-called safe zone to another, relentlessly bombed and starved, ethnic cleansing can morph into a genocide. This was the case in several well-known genocides of the 20th century, such as that of the Herero and Nama in German Southwest Africa, now Namibia, that began in 1904, the Armenians in World War I, and indeed even in the Holocaust, which began with the German attempt to expel the Jews and ended up with their murder. To this day, only a few scholars of the Holocaust and no institution dedicated to researching and commemorating it has issued a warning that Israel could be accused of carrying out war crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, or genocide. As a matter of fact, it's not even silence. They defend Israel's actions by attacking its critics, by consistently yelling about those who make any comparison whatsoever between the Holocaust and what Israel is doing right now as patently anti-Semitic. It's not even silence, it's defense of Israel's genocide. It's even worse. It's using the horrifying atrocities of the Holocaust, the historic crime that was done against Jewish people, as a mechanism to defend the current ongoing Holocaust that Israel is conducting at the behest of Jewish people as they falsely conflate Judaism and Zionism. It is incredible. This silence has made a mockery of the slogan, never again, transforming its meaning from an assertion of resistance to inhumanity wherever it's perpetrated to an excuse, an apology indeed, even a carte blanche for destroying others by invoking one's own past victimhood. Yeah, that's precisely what it is. Norm Finkelstein identified this in Holocaust Inc. many, many years ago. But at the time when he wrote that, that was considered a bridge too far. That was considered completely unacceptable. He wrote that decades ago about Israel utilizing Holocaust studies and using the historical atrocity of the Holocaust, or Holocaust industry, sorry, not Holocaust Inc., as a formative fixture of Zionism. Never again just for us. Israel must always remain militant. Israel has demographic concerns. Israel must be an ethno-state for Jews and Jews alone. Because if that doesn't happen, then the Holocaust will happen again. This is another of the many incalculable costs of the current catastrophe, as Israel is literally trying to wipe out Palestinian existence in Gaza and is exercising increasing violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. The moral and historical credit which the Jewish state has drawn on until now is running out. Once again, remember, this is from an Israeli perspective. So obviously, their words, like Omar's words, are going to be different than what I would say, okay? Like, oh, it's running out. It's run out. It's been run out. It's over. Israel, created in the wake of the Holocaust as the answer to the Nazi genocide of the Jews, has always insisted that any threat to its security must be seen as potentially leading to another Auschwitz. Like, think about it. Palestinians in Gaza are currently experiencing the Holocaust, right? Imagine if they were to escape and then go, I don't know, to like Argentina, okay? And they set up a state in Argentina and they just started slaughtering all of the Argentinians. Only a couple years after this Holocaust ends, they are shipped off to Argentina and they get weapons from other countries to basically slaughter the entirety of the Argentinian population. That's what Israel did. That's what Israel did. Like, think about how insane it is. That is the inception of the Israeli state, 3 years after the Holocaust. Just going in and just slaughtering and ethnically displacing and ethnically cleansing the land of its indigenous population, a group of people that had nothing to do with the historic atrocities that Jewish people faced. Nothing at all. It's incredible. And it's been a slow burn of domination, ritualistic humiliation, and death and destruction for 80 plus years. This provides Israel with license to portray those it perceives as its enemies as Nazis, a term used repeatedly by Israeli media figures to depict Hamas and by extension all Gazans based on the popular assertion that none of them are uninvolved, not even the infants who would grow up to be militants. Ironically enough, as I've said since October 8, if there is an analog between Nazis and the Jewish civilian population, if there's a modern analog, it's not Hamas that are the Nazis, it is Israel that are the Nazis. Yeah, I appreciate this piece. I appreciate peace is that, what? I appreciate this piece. Not only that it acknowledges the genocide, it also points directly at Israel's use of the Holocaust in defense. How Israel's actions will shape future understanding of the Holocaust should be a grave concern to anyone who cares about its memory. This is David Grossman says, this is about as concise a breakdown as there can be, and it doesn't even get into the horrors perpetrated by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation or Israeli use of AI to generate endless targets. This is not a new phenomenon. As early as Israel's invasion of Lebanon in 1982, Prime Minister Menachem Begin compared Yasser Arafat, then hunkered down in Beirut, to Adolf Hitler in his Berlin bunker. This time, the analogy is being used in connection with a policy aimed at uprooting and removing the entire population of Gaza. The daily scenes of horror in Gaza, from which the Israeli public is shielded by its own media self-censorship, expose the lies of Israeli propaganda that this is a war of defense against a Nazi-like enemy. One shudders when Israeli spokespeople shamelessly utter the hollow slogan to the IDF being the most moral army in the world. The most moral army in the world. That's what the Nazis said about their own military as well. Some European nations such as France, Britain, Germany, as well as Canada have feebly protested Israeli actions, especially since it breached the ceasefire in March. But they have neither suspended arms shipments nor taken many concrete and meaningful economic or political steps that might deter Mr. Netanyahu's government. For a while, the United States government seemed to have lost interest in Gaza, with President Trump initially announcing in February that the United States would take over Gaza, promising to turn it into the Riviera of the Middle East, and then letting Israel get on with the Strip's destruction and turning his attention to Iran. At a moment, one can only hope that Mr. Trump will again pressure a reluctant Mr. Netanyahu to at least reach a new ceasefire and put an end to the relentless killing. I've said this before, but the only time Israel stands down is when it is too much of a cost for either the Israeli civilian public or too much of a cost for the Israeli military. When they lose too many lives, that's the only time, or the mere threat of losing lives, the mere threat of losing their economic standing in the world. That is the only time Israel stands down, when it is forced to do so. America has all of the power to basically make Israel stand down since day one, since October 8, and yet they've never chosen to do so. They have unilateral power and control over Israel's actions here, and they've never done it. All it takes is one phone call. Remember that. How will Israel's future be affected by the inevitable demolition of its incontestable morality derived from its birth in the ashes of the Holocaust? Israel's political leadership and its citizenry will have to decide. There seems to be little domestic pressure for the urgently needed change of the paradigm. The recognition that there is no solution to this conflict other than an Israeli-Palestinian agreement to share the land under whatever parameters the two sides agree on, be it two states, one state, or a confederation. Again, an Israeli Holocaust scholar literally saying that there are options beyond the fake two-state is also a change of attitude. Okay? This also must be recognized. You could say too little, too late, but there are a lot of people who have taken their sweet-ass time on this shit, and their admissions, their recognition of these atrocities is actually good because it moves the needle in the appropriate direction for a lot of the holdover people, okay? Because the only way to slowly but surely, the only way to come to a reasonable conclusion here is through public pressure. That's it. And I know you see the death and destruction and you think, these people, all of these people that have like turned a blind eye to this up until this moment. And I totally understand why you feel that way, but you have to suck it up. Okay? You have to suck it up and you have to keep pushing. That's it. Because every new person that comes to this recognition matters. Okay? That's just the way I've always seen it. I've never actually turned around and on people who have recognized these atrocities post October 7. I have never actually people who have come into this community after, a year after, and said, hey, you know what? This is a genocide. I agree. This is what's going on. How do we stop it? The reason why I haven't done that is because this is not about moral posturing. Okay, this is about creating a insurmountable amount of pressure that is impossible to contend with, so much so that the American government has to recalculate its undying loyalty and allegiance to the state of Israel as it's consistently continuing to conduct a genocidal campaign in Gaza. Okay, that's it. That's why I always say, if you offer unconditional support to the Palestinian population, okay, no matter at what point, if you come out and you say, I'm an anti-Zionist, I'm offering unconditional support to the Palestinians, I'm not going to shit on you. Now, of course, there's a limit to that, because if you offer support, if you offer a recognition to the genocide and then use all of your time and space shitting on the left for being correct, or on anti-Zionists for being right all along, or offering an untold amount of criticisms that surround the feelings of hypothetical Jewish people that you've invented in your mind, then suck my dick, okay? If you spend all of your time, all of your energy, all of your efforts on deplatforming pro-Palestinian voices and talking about how you recognize the genocide, but actually all of the people that are resisting against the genocide are very scary, which offers moral cover to Israel's actions, then you're out of your mind. Save it. That's it. What are you doing? There's only one right thing to state here. If you recognize that it's a genocide, then what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Oh, it's a genocide, but also the people that are militarily trying to stop it, the people that are trying to put an end to it, the people that are defending themselves are actually in the wrong. This does not make sense. This does not make any sense. You would never say that about the Jewish partisans. You would never say that about the French resistance. Oh, it's a genocide that's going on. But also, well, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was pretty violent. There is no but after it's a genocide. And the only time I've seen people actually try to do this, because like Bernie Sanders doesn't do this, right? There are prominent liberal Zionists. Brad Lander doesn't do this. There are prominent liberal Zionists who have a difference in opinion from someone like myself. But the reason why I don't spend a lot of time on them actively is because regardless of their difference in opinion on this matter, they step aside. They at least have the recognition. They at least know that it's unproductive to consistently try and use their position or their platform to rail against those who do see the truth. That's it. It's that simple. At least have some shame to shut the up. Okay? The moment that you start criticizing militant resistance against this unimaginable cruelty is a moment where you're basically offering support to the Israeli state. You can call it a genocide all day, every day, and be like, what more do you want? I'm considering it a genocide. It's like, okay, well, you don't. You actually don't. You're just lying. You think that is giving you some kind of allowance to just also say the same shit that the Israeli state is saying. Oh, they're using human shields. It's a genocide, but Hamas is using human shields. No, the fuck they're not. That's just an Israeli lie. That's just a lie. Oh, it's a genocide, but like, don't say Zionism is Nazi ideology. Don't say Zionism is a fascist ideology. What do you mean? So how did Israel decide to do a genocide then? How did this opinion form? Do you really believe it's a genocide? It doesn't make sense, okay? It doesn't make sense. It's that simple. Simply coming to the recognition that it's a genocide or just saying that doesn't unlock protection for you so you can literally keep doing Hasbara, keep doing propaganda for the state of Israel that is conducting the genocide. No one believes this. No one agrees with you on this. Ridiculous. Oh, Israel's doing a genocide, but Palestinians are really homophobic. Palestinians are anti-women. They're scary. They're terrorist Muslims. And the hidden underlying truth there is that your feelings are hurt because you're scared. Because if you actually recognize truly that it's a genocide, then understandably, any sort of militant resistance against such atrocious actions by the state are justified, and you can't contend with that. Okay? You can't, because you don't actually think they're Nazis and you don't actually think it's a genocide. Just simply saying it does not make it so. It's that simple. This frustrates people. This frustrates people to no end, because the real issue here initially was the recognition of Israel as an apartheid state was a big no-no, because once they recognize that, then okay, everything in the West Bank is fair game. Anything the Palestinians are doing in the West Bank is appropriate. It's legal. It's moral. Okay? Anything that Palestinians are doing in Gaza is legal and moral against the Israeli state that is occupying their existence. Maybe not to the same degree as the West Bank. There is like some semblance of autonomy there, but it's not real, because Israel controls everything that's going in and out into the Gaza Strip, 24/7 mass surveillance, a de facto open-air concentration camp. There is no both sides on an apartheid. There's no both sides on a genocide. And that's what a lot of the people that defend Israel recognize. So that's precisely the reason why they actively have tried to suppress this truth from becoming the majority position. And it's too late now. It is the majority position. So if you spent every waking moment of the past 2 years actively going after and documenting and putting your statements out there in opposition to those who oppose Israel's genocide while simultaneously claiming it's a genocide, history will not look fondly at your contributions. What a spectacularly self-interested and stupid moment for those who did that. You're a abhorrent little demon. You're a failure. And people will remember that. People will remember how you occupied yourself and how you used the finite amount of time you have. That stain will live on forever. Robust external pressure from the country's allies also appears unlikely. I'm deeply worried that Israel will persist on its disastrous course, remaking itself, perhaps irreversibly, into a full-blown authoritarian apartheid state. Such states, as history has taught us, do not last. Another question arises. What consequences will Israel's moral reversal have for the culture of Holocaust commemoration and the politics of memory, education, and scholarship when so many of its intellectual and administrative leaders have up to now refused to face up to their own responsibility to denounce inhumanity and genocide wherever they occur? Those engaged in worldwide cultural commemoration and remembrance built around the Holocaust will have to confront a moral reckoning. The wider community of genocide scholars, those engaged in the study of comparative genocide or any of the many other genocides that have marred human history, is now edging ever closer towards a consensus over describing the events in Gaza as a genocide. In November, a little more than a year into the war, the Israeli genocide scholar Shmuel Liederman joined the growing chorus of opinion that Israel was engaged in genocidal actions. The Canadian international lawyer William Shabbos came to the same conclusion last year and has recently described Israel's military campaign in Gaza as absolutely a genocide. Other genocide experts such as Melanie O'Brien, president of the International Association of Genocide Scholars, and the British specialist Martin Shaw, who has said that the Hamas attack was genocidal, just ridiculous, have reached the same conclusion. While the Australian scholar Dirk Moses of the City University of New York described these events in the Dutch publication NRC as a mix of genocidal and military logic. In the same article, Umit Unger, a professor at the Amsterdam-based NIOD Institute of War, Holocaust, and Genocide Studies, said there are probably scholars who still do not think it's a genocide, but I don't know them. Most Holocaust scholars I know don't hold or at least publicly express this view, with a few notable exceptions such as the Israeli Ras Segal, program director of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Stockton University in New Jersey, and the Hebrew University of Jerusalem historians Amos Goldberg and Daniel Blattman. The majority of academics with the history of the Nazi genocide of the Jews have stayed remarkably silent, while some have openly denied. Well, by the way, respect to him for openly naming Ras Segal, who I said was from the start demonstrating moral clarity regardless of whatever the career repercussions may be. There were people who were very aware of what the was going on, and they try to put an end to it by saying the truth before it got to this level. And they suffered repercussions for it. While some have openly denied Israel's crimes in Gaza or accused their more critical colleagues of incendiary speech, wild exaggeration, well poisoning, and anti-Semitism. In December, the Holocaust scholar Norman J.W. Goda opined that genocide charges like this have long been used as a fig leaf for broader challenges to Israel's legitimacy, expressing his worry that they have cheapened the gravity of the word genocide itself. This genocide libel, as Dr. Goda referred to in an essay, deploys a range of anti-Semitic tropes, including the coupling of the genocide charge with the deliberate killing of children, images of whom are ubiquitous on NGO, social media, and other platforms that charge Israel with genocide. In other words, showing images of Palestinian children ripped apart by U.S.-made bombs launched by Israeli pilots is, in this view, an anti-Semitic act. And there are plenty of people who believe that. You must understand, there are people who legitimately, including, some content creators, if I were to draw this back to like influencers with platforms, have said this. It is not the act of bombing children that is the problem here. It is the act of recognition. Because when you see that happening, if you don't immediately contextualize it and justify it as a necessity, then you might actually create an environment where people get mad. People get mad at Jewish people. Ridiculous. Instead of actively working to decouple Judaism from Israel's actions, if you still try to maintain this position, you are the one who is actually harming Jews around the world. Okay? Most recently, Dr. Goda and a respected historian of Europe, Jeffrey Herf, wrote in the Washington Post that the genocide accusation hurled against Israel draws on deep wells of fear and hatred found in radical interpretations of both Christianity and Islam. It has shifted opprobrium from Jews as a religious ethnic group to the state of Israel, which it depicts as inherently evil. What are the ramifications of this rift between genocide scholars and Holocaust historians? This is not merely a squabble within academia. The memory culture created in recent decades around the Holocaust encompasses much more than the genocide of the Jews. It has come to play a crucial role in politics, education, and identity. Museums dedicated to the Holocaust have served as models for representations of other genocides around the world. Insistence that the lessons of the Holocaust demand the promotion of tolerance, diversity, anti-racism, and support for migrants and refugees, not to mention human rights and international humanitarian law, is rooted in an understanding of the universal implications of the crime in the heart of Western civilization at the peak of modernity. That is the inherent irony. The inherent irony here is that the Holocaust was held up as a singular, atrocious event. And in many respects, it was. Okay? The mechanized death and destruction. But you can't teach people for years and years what the Holocaust is and how unacceptable the Holocaust is, and to educate people that never again means never again for anybody, only to turn around and do the same things to the Palestinian population and expect people not to feel some type of way about it. It is the nefarious utilization of the Zionist project, the nefarious utilization of the Holocaust by the Zionist project that is actually playing a formative role in its own demise. Ironically enough, for years and years, singling out the Holocaust played a formative role in the defense of Israel. But because you taught people that being a Nazi was wrong, thank God, and because you taught people that, the Holocaust was atrocious, of course, when Jews or the Jewish state, by their own declaration, not mine, is conducting these same incidents, these same atrocious events, people are not going to turn around and say, oh, well, you guys get to have one because it happened to you. It doesn't work that way. What is this? Stop arguing amongst yourselves. For my entire life, the Holocaust was taught to me at Jewish camp and school, with the main takeaway, never again, was not just a slogan. It has been the greatest shame to see those same institutions have no understanding of what never again really means. Yeah, because for them, it was just a justification to defend the state of Israel, no matter how atrocious or how violent those actions may become. That's why. It was a cynical weaponization of a historic, unimaginable harm done to the Jewish people to defend the Jewish state. Discrediting genocide scholars who call out Israel's genocide in Gaza as anti-Semitic threatens to erode the foundation of genocide studies, the ongoing need to define, prevent, and punish and reconstruct the history of genocide, suggesting that this endeavor is motivated instead by malign interests and sentiments, that it is driven by the very hatred and prejudice that was at the root of the Holocaust, is not only morally scandalous, it provides an opening for a politics of denialism and impunity as well. That is precisely what it is. By the same token, when those who have dedicated their careers to teaching and commemorating the Holocaust insist on ignoring or denying Israel's genocidal actions in Gaza, they threaten to undermine everything that Holocaust scholarship and commemoration have stood for in the past several decades. That is the dignity of every human being, respect for the rule of law, and the urgent need to Never let inhumanity take over the hearts of people and steer the actions of nations in the name of security, national interest, and sheer vengeance. What I fear is that in the aftermath of the Gaza genocide, it will no longer be possible to continue teaching and researching the Holocaust in the same manner we did before. Because the Holocaust has been so relentlessly invoked by the state of Israel and its defenders as a cover-up of the crimes of the IDF, the study and remembers of the Holocaust could lose its claim to be concerned with the universal justice and retreat into the same ethnic ghetto in which it began its life at the end of World War II, as a marginalized preoccupation by the remnants of a marginalized people, an ethnically specific event, before it succeeded, decades later, to find its rightful place as a lesson and a warning for humanity as a whole. Just as worrisome is the prospect that the study of genocide as a whole will not survive the accusations of anti-Semitism, leaving us without the crucial community of scholars and international jurists to stand in the breach at a time when the rise of intolerance, racial hatred, populism, and authoritarianism is threatening the values that were at the core of these scholarly, cultural, and political endeavors of the 20th century. Perhaps the only light at the end of this very dark tunnel is the possibility that a new generation of Israelis will face their future without sheltering in the shadow of the Holocaust, even as they will have to bear the stain of the genocide in Gaza perpetrated in their name. Israel will have to learn to live without falling back on the Holocaust as a justification for inhumanity. That, despite all the horrific suffering we're currently watching, is a valuable thing and may, in the long run, help Israel face the future in a healthier, more rational, and less fearful and violent manner. Of course, considering that he has come to this recognition 2 years or a year too late, I think, because he changed his attitude around like May 2024 or 6 months, 7 months too late. There is more room to grow for someone like Omar, for many others. But obviously, staking their reputation and their scholarly work to make a statement like this on the New York Times, I'm not going to them too much. I'm not going to criticize them too much. Okay? This will do nothing to compensate for the staggering amount of death and suffering in Palestinians, but in Israel, liberated from the overwhelming burden of the Holocaust, may finally come to terms with the inescapable need for its 7 million Jewish citizens to share the land with the 7 million Palestinians living in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank in peace, equality, and dignity. That will be the only just reckoning. What did Omar say that was wrong in this piece? I mean, obviously he's Israeli, so his focus on this, his commentary on this revolves around like almost an impossibility that like Israel will come to the recognition, or maybe even focuses too much on the historical significance of the Holocaust as it shapes Jewish identity, as it shapes Israel's identity. It almost comes across as like a hidden premise that like Israel was a necessity after the Holocaust, which is the underpinning of Zionist theory. That is the underlying fundamental principle beyond that stretches from, oh, maybe Israel shouldn't be so violent, but it has to exist as a Jewish nation state, all the way to we have to massacre every single person that is non-Jewish in this area. Like it stretches all the way from I want a two-state solution all the way down to I want a one-state solution where all the Palestinians have been wiped out. But given that he's a Holocaust scholar, of course, it's understandable. But also the idea that like this is in the aftermath of the Gaza genocide, it will no longer be possible to continue teaching and research the Holocaust in the same manner we did before, or rather, the idea that like there is a future Israel out there where the future Israeli children will come to the recognition that what they did was unacceptable. But I do appreciate and respect that he says equal rights for all. The reality of the matter is, Israel from its inception, even before the nation state was developed and designed, was a settler colonial project. And therefore, it was violent inherently. Okay? It threatened the very existence of the Palestinians that were living there. And we saw that play itself out in the Nakba, and we've seen it play itself out over and over again over the course of the past 80 plus years. If there was a commitment to a binational singular state from the start, as Einstein also demanded from the Israeli state, as he warned that they were becoming Nazis early on in the aftermath of some of the atrocities that led to what is known as the Nakba, the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, okay, then this would not be a problem. There would be no issues, because that would not be Israel. It would be something else. It would be a different formation. You cannot separate ethnic cleansing from Zionism. That is why whenever people talk about Zionism being something that is really important to all Jews, a formative part of like Jewish identity, and when you're criticizing Zionists, you're criticizing all Jews, like this is a stupid argument. I'm identifying the ideological underpinnings of Zionism as an inherently violent one because it revolves around the ethno-religious supremacy of one group, the in-group, and the exterminationist policies that that in-group engages in on the out-group, all the Christians and Muslims that live in that area, all the Arabs, all the Muslims, all the Christians that live in this area. It's a total annihilationist. It's a complete extermination. That is the finality of this project. No ands, ifs, or buts. You should be ashamed to associate that with the entire Jewish population. And I think perhaps in the future, there will be a sense of shame with this association when all is said and done. It is up to us to put an end to it before it turns into land acknowledgements that we offer to the indigenous population here in the United States or in Canada, to the First Nations people. Oh, well, you know, it was bad when it happened, but also, you know, what are you going to do? How are the Hofstra professional genocide deniers going to deal with this? Will they say the Dean's professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Brown is not qualified to determine this? Or will they say this IDF veteran is Hamas? I mean, yeah, pretty much. I suspect that is what they will say. By the way, here's how America is working with this. Oh, how are the comment section looking? I don't know if they have the comments up on this piece. Let me see. There's 1,000 comments on this. Jesus Christ. Thank you. This was thoughtful and insightful article. Unfortunately, fails to move the needle of the argument whether or not Israel's response to Hamas attack constitutes genocide. A single word can carry so much emotional and moral burden. But is there another word that captures the horror of saying directly or indicating by one's actions that under certain circumstances the intentional and wanton killing of children is warranted and justified? Let's see the reader's picks. Detailed, thorough, and unimpeachable. Someday everyone will have always been against this. For some of us who also grew up in Zionist households, it is hard to deny what has been unfolding in front of our eyes despite Israel's efforts to censor the news. Israel's actions in Gaza and the West Bank are a betrayal of Jewish values. The country under a present leadership is using its undoubted military process to effect a long-held goal of territorial expansion and the final resolution of what it perceives as a Palestinian problem. The country is in moral decline and in the process of dragging the U.S. down with it. Rather than putting an end to the atrocities, Secretary of State Rubio's only response has been to sanction the critics of Israel's actions like the ICC judges and Francesca Albanese. Shame on him and all of us for allowing this crime to occur yet again. Nothing terrifies the powers that be more than a well-reasoned, lucid, informative voice expressing an opinion founded in integrity. If starving, maiming, and killing young children by the scores isn't a crime against humanity, what is? How many angels on the head of a pin is genocide, as hard as it is for a Jew like myself to realize? One doesn't have to read this analysis to reach this conclusion, but this article lays it out well as expert testimony. This is why I say it takes, like, this is why I don't entertain the Jewish exceptionalism arguments so much. Because the reality of the matter is sometimes that's what it takes, okay? I know that. I know my limitations. I know my own personal limitations, okay? I have, in my opinion, fairly successfully been able to convince many young American Jews, okay? Not that it matters at the end of the day, because the truth doesn't change whether all Jews are against this genocide or all Jews are for this genocide. It doesn't matter, right? And, but ultimately, like, I think I've been able to convince many young Americans, including many young American Jews, on the scale of these atrocities, on what Zionism actually means, right? Having said that, there are still limitations, especially given my background. When someone hears the name Hasan, okay, and they have been taught that there is, they have a lot of underlying implicit biases that, like, oh, someone by the name of Hasan who is Muslim is obviously going to take this position because he just hates Jews deep down inside. No matter how much I've advocated against anti-Semitism, it does not matter, okay? There are some people that need to hear it from a Jewish Israeli Holocaust scholar. It's that simple. There are some that need to hear it from a white guy who's Christian. There are some who need to hear it from a Jewish guy who's in Israel. It is what it is. When I was younger, I was just sort of, what is this? Oh, fuck, hold on. That person in the replies is posting some imagery that might be TOS. When I was younger, I was just sort of passively aware that there's something wrong with Israel. The thing that helped me see it was more than just a state that behaved poorly, was reading accounts of settler lynchings like this. It is very, very difficult to think of a worse group. Yeah, I do think so. I think that like actions in the West Bank cause a lot of people to actually contextualize the violence as like personal violence. Many people have been taught that entire building blocks coming down is just normal. It's just like Arabs kind of deserving of that. It's collateral damage. As an American Jew, your initial coverings of the settler lynchings in Palestine pre-October 7th got me to understand. Yeah, I think for a lot of people in the Western world, when they see the horrible actions of the West Bank settlers, that causes them to recognize exactly what's going on, that this is an unsustainable, supremacist, fascist ideology. Like, this is, all sensible people hate Hamas, but Jewish history does not give the IDF a free pass. There's that. And I don't think that will be able to, I don't think people will be able to fucking ever decouple that. I want to see the replies to it. What's your urban warfare strategy when the enemy holds your people hostage and uses his own civilians as human shields, Roy? Apparently sensible. He okayed the funneling money of Hamas through Qatar. He doesn't get a free pass either. The Hamas leaders were all safely in Lebanon, Syria, Qatar, Dubai, other places by the time the IDF attacked. None of it is true, by the way. This is not true. This is the last thing that liberals will inevitably come to the conclusion on, which is that any kind of militant resistance against Israeli state actions is understandable. Okay? Of course it's understandable. What the fuck are the people supposed to do? Just sit quietly and idly by and allow to be massacred? Yeah, Yahya Sinwar, the architect of October 7, literally died in battle. He died in the Gaza Strip. He did not have a bunch of like Israeli babies attached to his body in the way that like the Israeli media had portrayed him. He died fighting. That's it. As an American Jew, prior to 10/7, I used to agree with 90% of your views, but turn off the stream when you covered Israel. Post 10/7, I came back and you helped me completely reshape my worldview to be firmly anti-Zionist. Thank you for that. Of course. Thank you for your understanding. It is not easy to go against a shit ton of social conditioning. Okay? It's not easy. I get that. I recognize the position that we are all in the United States of America. I recognize like where we're coming from. That's why I try to actively communicate to people in similar, incredibly privileged conditions that we have. That's why I also always say everyone has a different role, okay? Everyone plays a different role here. This is what I have seen my role to be. That's why I don't criticize Mehdi Hasan all that much. Zateo has done phenomenal work, obviously, but it's understandable that some people get a little disturbed or a little angry with Mehdi Hasan when he routinely will pay the piper, if you will, and regularly, with regular frequency, criticize the militancy against Israel, right? But ultimately, someone's got to fucking be in those rooms. Someone's got to be in those rooms defending the humanity of the Palestinians. It's that simple. And you can't be in those rooms defending the humanity of the Palestinians if you don't, constantly condom hummus over and over and over again. And even then, he still lost his job.